The scent of ripening grapes filled the morning air as I scrolled through my Instagram feed. My perfectly curated posts of Horizon Estates sun-drenched vineyards stared back at me. 10 years ago, I would have laughed if someone told me I'd become a wine influencer with 100,000 followers. Back then, I was just Amanda Chen, the ambitious marketing director at a Silicon Valley startup. Now I'm Amanda Chen-Grant, wife of Richard Grant, owner of one of Napa Valley's most prestigious wineries. The morning sun streamed through our bedroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the Italian marble floor. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, hesitating before posting my latest story. Something about the image bothered me, perhaps the way the workers were handling the pesticide equipment near the organic section we'd promoted so heavily. But Richard's voice echoed in my head, "The social media presence must be perfect, Amanda. It's what sells our story." I hit post and watched the likes roll in. The ceiling fan whirred softly above, its steady rhythm matching my shallow breaths. My marriage to Richard had been a calculated decision, much like his acquisition of this vineyard. He saw potential in both raw materials that could be refined into something valuable. A notification popped up on my screen, environmental inspection scheduled for next week. My stomach tightened. I knew about the shortcuts Richard had been taking, the corners he'd been cutting to maintain our image of sustainable luxury. The sound of tires on gravel drew my attention to the window. A dusty Prius pulled up to our grand entrance, looking comically out of place among the luxury cars in our circular driveway. My heart stopped when I saw who stepped out. Ethan Grant, Richard's son. The environmental activist who hadn't spoken to his father in 5 years. My hands grew cold as I watched him retrieve a worn backpack from the trunk. He looked different from the photos I'd seen, leaner, more weathered, with a beard that spoke of months in the field. The morning suddenly felt heavier, charged with an electricity that made my skin prickle. I hadn't expected him to look so alive. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard, "In meetings all day in SF, handle Ethan if he shows up." Of course. Richard always knew more than he let on. I changed out of my silk robe into a casual linen dress, my fingers trembling slightly as I fastened the buttons. The mirror reflected a woman I sometimes didn't recognize, perfectly highlighted hair, designer clothes, manicured nails. A far cry from the tech nerd I used to be. The doorbell rang, its deep chime reverberating through our marble halls. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and descended the curved staircase. Each step felt like a countdown to something I couldn't name. When I opened the door, the morning sun caught in Ethan's eyes, turning them from brown to amber. "You moo. STB Amanda," he said, his voice softer than I'd imagined. "And you're Ethan," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded. He smiled, and something inside me shifted, like a compass finding true north. "I suppose we have a lot to talk about," he said, glancing past me into the house. The foyer suddenly felt too large and too small at the same time. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, falling back on hospitality to mask my unease. He nodded, following me through the house. His footsteps were nearly silent on our expensive floors, like he was trying to leave no trace. In the kitchen, I busied myself with our professional-grade espresso machine, grateful for something to do with my hands. "Quite a change from the old place," Ethan commented, looking around at the gleaming surfaces and high-end appliances. I thought of the photos I'd seen of the original farmhouse, before Richard had torn it down to build this showcase home. "Your father has a very specific vision," I said carefully. The espresso machine hissed and steamed. That's one way to put it, Ethan replied, a hint of steel beneath his casual tone. I handed him a cup, our fingers brushing briefly. A jolt of awareness shot through me, unexpected and unwelcome. I saw your Instagram posts about the sustainable farming initiative, he said, taking a sip. My cheeks heated. Of course he had. It's important to Richard that we lead by example, I said, the words tasting false on my tongue. Is that why there are pesticide containers hidden behind the organic certification signs? The cup nearly slipped from my hands. I don't know what you're talking about, I said automatically. But I did. I'd seen them myself, tried to convince myself they were for the non-organic sections. Ethan set his cup down with deliberate care. I think you do, Amanda. The way he said my name made me look up. His eyes held no judgment, only a quiet certainty that unnerved me. Why are you here? I asked, needing to change the subject. Official business. I'm leading the environmental impact assessment team. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Does Richard know? He will soon enough. Outside, a hummingbird hovered by the kitchen window, its wings a blur of motion. For a moment, I envied its ability to stay suspended between moments. The inspection isn't scheduled until next week, I said. Consider this a courtesy heads up, Ethan replied, pushing away from the counter. He moved with an easy grace that seemed at odds with his purpose here. I should show you around then, I offered, not sure why I was helping him. I grew up here, remember? His smile held a touch of sadness. The property's changed a lot since then. So I see. We walked through the house in silence, our footsteps echoing off marble and glass. Every room showcased Richard's success, the art, the furniture, the views carefully framed by architectural windows. But Ethan's presence made it all feel hollow somehow. When we reached the back terrace, the morning fog was just lifting from the vineyards. Rows of vines stretched toward the horizon, their leaves glinting silver in the strengthening sun. It's beautiful, I said softly, meaning it. Beauty can hide a lot of ugly truths, Ethan replied. I turned to look at him, struck by the intensity in his face. Is that why you left? I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes met mine, and something passed between us, quick and dangerous as summer lightning. I left because I couldn't pretend anymore. The words hung in the air between us. A breeze stirred my hair, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. And something else, the faint chemical smell I'd been trying to ignore for months. The workers will be starting soon, I said, checking my watch. I should go set up my equipment, Ethan agreed. But neither of us moved. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. Then my phone chimed, another Instagram notification. The spell broke. I'll be around, Ethan said, already turning away. I watched him walk down the terrace steps, his figure growing smaller against the backdrop of vines. My phone kept buzzing in my hand. Comments were pouring in on my latest post about our sustainable farming practices. Each notification felt like an accusation. I went back inside, my heels clicking against the floor with military precision. In my home office, I pulled up our PR calendar. The Harvest Festival was in 2 weeks, our biggest social media event of the year. Thousands of followers would be watching our live streams. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. A quick search brought up Ethan's environmental consulting firm. His profile photo showed him in the Amazon, surrounded by local farmers. The man in the picture looked nothing like the polished Silicon Valley executive Richard had wanted him to become. He looked happy. My phone rang, Richard's private line. "Is he there?" he asked without preamble. "Yes." "What does he want?" I hesitated, my finger tracing the edge of my desk. "He's leading the environmental assessment team." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Handle it, Amanda," Richard said finally. "What do you mean, handle it?" "You're good at making problems disappear. That's why I married you." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling something crack inside me. Through my office window, I could see Ethan in the distance, setting up monitoring equipment. The sun caught his hair as he bent to his work, turning it to gold. A memory surfaced, my first marketing job, before the startup's success. I'd believed in things then. Had principles. The woman I used to be would have helped Ethan expose the truth. But that woman didn't live in a multi-million-dollar house. Didn't have hundreds of thousands of followers hanging on her every post. Didn't have everything to lose. I opened Instagram and began crafting a story about our upcoming harvest festival. My fingers moved automatically, adding the right filters, the perfect hashtags. Outside, Ethan continued his work, unaware that I was about to become his enemy. The morning wore on, sun climbing higher in the California sky. I had meetings with our social media team, approved influencer partnerships, reviewed wine club memberships. But my attention kept drifting to the window. To Ethan. To the choice I knew was coming. At lunch, I found myself walking the vineyard rows. The workers nodded respectfully as I passed. They knew me as Mrs. Grant, the boss's wife who spoke perfect Mandarin and took their children's college photos for free. I wondered what they thought about the pesticides. About the organic certification signs. About the lies. A voice called my name. I turned to find Ethan approaching, his equipment bag slung over one shoulder. "Find what you were looking for?" I asked, aiming for casual. "You know I did." The sun beat down on us, heavy as judgment. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on you." My heart kicked against my ribs. "What do you mean?" "I think you know exactly what I mean, Amanda." He stepped closer, and suddenly I could smell him, earth and sweat and something uniquely male. "I saw your old TED Talk," he said softly. I stiffened. "The one about ethical technology and corporate responsibility." That was a long time ago. Was it? Or does that woman still exist somewhere under all this? He gestured at my designer outfit, my perfect makeup. I took a step back, needing distance. People change, Ethan. Do they? Or do they just get better at lying to themselves? A worker passed nearby, pushing a cart of equipment. The moment stretched between us like taffy. "I have to go," I said finally. "Think about what I said." I turned and walked away, my heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. Behind me, I heard him sigh. That night, I couldn't sleep. Richard was still in the city, probably at his club with other wealthy men who thought rules were for other people. I sat on our terrace, a glass of our award-winning Cabernet in my hand. The night was alive with cricket song and the distant hoot of an owl. My phone lay dark beside me. I'd turned off notifications after dinner, unable to bear the stream of comments from followers excited about the harvest festival. About our commitment to sustainable farming. The wine tasted like ashes in my mouth. A light flickered in the guest house where Ethan was staying. I wondered what he was writing in his report. Wondered what he thought of me. Wondered why that mattered so much. The night air carried the scent of ripening grapes, sweet and heavy. Soon the harvest would begin. Soon everything would change. I just didn't know how yet. My phone lit up, a text from Richard. Everything under control? I stared at the message for a long time. The crickets chirped. The owl call. Ed. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the dramas playing out beneath them. Finally, I typed yes. But my finger hovered over the send button. In the distance, Ethan's light still burned, calling me like a beacon. Like truth. Like hope. Like danger. I deleted the message and made a decision that would change everything. The morning of the harvest festival dawned clear and bright. My Instagram feed was already buzzing with excited posts from influencers en route to Horizon Estate. I stood in my closet, staring at rows of designer dresses. None of them felt right anymore. Like a skin I'd outgrown. The file Ethan had given me last night lay hidden in my desk drawer. Evidence of years of environmental violations, all meticulously documented. My hands trembled as I finally selected a simple white linen dress. The same one I'd worn when Ethan first arrived. Downstairs, the staff was already setting up for the event. Richard had returned late last night, bringing with him the sharp scent of expensive scotch and barely concealed anger. He knew something was wrong. He always knew. "You look tired," he said when I entered the kitchen. His voice was soft, dangerous. "Didn't sleep well," I replied, avoiding his eyes. "Worried about something?" I poured coffee with steady hands, years of practice keeping my face neutral. "Just the festival." He watched me over his tablet, his eyes cold. "I saw Ethan's car is still here. He's doing his job. And you're doing yours, I hope." The threat in his voice made my spine stiffen. Outside, cars were beginning to arrive. I could hear the excited chatter of social media influencers, their cameras already clicking. "I should go greet our guests," I said. Richard's hand caught my wrist as I passed. "Remember who you are, Amanda." I looked down at his fingers, pale against my skin. "I'm starting to," I replied. His grip tightened for a moment before releasing. The morning air hit me like a wave as I stepped onto the terrace. Influencers in flowing dresses were already posing among the vines. Their laughter felt hollow, distant. My phone buzzed with notifications. I ignored them all. Ethan stood at the edge of the property, his equipment set up discreetly behind some trees. Our eyes met across the crowd. He nodded once, a question in his gaze. I touched the pendant at my throat, our agreed signal. Everything was ready. The live stream would begin in 1 hour. My hands were steady as I greeted guests, posed for photos, answered questions about our sustainable practices. Each lie felt like a stone in my stomach. But soon they wouldn't be lies anymore. The sun climbed higher, turning the vineyard into a sea of green and gold. Richard worked the crowd like the Silicon Valley veteran he was. Charming, commanding, completely in control. He had no idea what was coming. At exactly 11 a.m., I began the live stream. Thousands of followers joined instantly. I walked through the vineyard, camera in hand, describing our harvest process. The workers smiled for the camera, used to their roles in this performance. Then I turned toward the organic section, where the hidden pesticide containers waited, where Ethan's sensors had been recording data for days. My heart thundered in my chest. And now, I said to the camera, I want to show you something important. Richard appeared beside me, his hand gripping my elbow. Amanda, he warned softly. But it was too late. I was already walking, the camera steady in my hands. Showing everything. The containers. The sensors. The proof. Comments exploded across the screen. Shocked faces. Angry emojis. Questions. So many questions. Richard's fingers dug into my arm. Stop the stream, he hissed. No. The single word felt like freedom. Ethan emerged from the trees, his own camera recording. The environmental assessment team has been gathering data, I told my viewers. My voice grew stronger with each word. Horizon Estate has been violating environmental regulations for years. Richard's face turned purple. You're destroying everything, he snarled. No, I said clearly, making sure the camera caught every word. I'm fixing it. The next hours passed in a blur. Influencers fled the property, their perfect photos forgotten. News vans arrived. Reporters shouted questions. My follower count dropped by thousands. Then rose again as the story spread. Through it all, Ethan stayed close. Not touching. Just present. A quiet strength at my back. Richard disappeared into the house with his lawyers. I sat on the terrace steps, watching my carefully curated life crumble. And feeling lighter with each falling piece. You okay? Ethan asked softly. The sun was setting, painting the vineyard in shades of fire. No, I answered honestly. But I will be. He sat beside me, our shoulders barely touching. What made you decide? I looked out at the vines, thinking of all they'd witnessed. I remembered who I used to be. And who was that? Someone who believed in truth. The crickets began their evening song. A cool breeze carried the scent of grapes and earth. And possibility. What happens now? I asked. The EPA will investigate. Richard won't go down easily. No, Ethan agreed. But he's not as powerful as he thinks. My phone lay silent in my lap. I'd turned off notifications hours ago. The story was everywhere now. #Horizon Estate scandal was trending. My hands should have been shaking. But they weren't. I'll lose everything, I said. It wasn't a complaint. Just a fact. Not everything, Ethan replied. His hand found mine in the gathering dusk. Warm. Real. True. Inside the house, lights blazed as Richard's crisis team worked. But out here, in the vineyard we'd pretended was perfect, something new was growing. Something honest. The night deepened around us. Stars appeared, one by one. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. We just sat there, holding hands in the darkness, letting the truth settle around us like dew. Tomorrow would bring chaos. Lawyers. Investigations. Consequences. But tonight, for the first time in years, I could breathe. The air tasted like freedom. Like courage. Like hope. A shooting star streaked across the sky. I didn't make a wish. I didn't need to. I already had everything I needed. The truth. My integrity. And Ethan's hand in mine. The rest would sort itself out. One way or another. The crickets sang. The grapes ripened. And somewhere in the darkness, a new story was beginning. One that didn't need filters or hashtags or careful curation. Just truth. And love. And the courage to choose both. No matter the cost. The night wrapped around us like a blanket. Protecting. Promising. Perfect in its imperfection. Just like us. Just like life. Just like love. Real love. True love. The kind that grows in darkness and light. In truth and consequences. In the space between what was and what could be. I squeezed Ethan's hand. He squeezed back. And in that simple gesture, I found my answer. My future. My truth. The rest was just details. Beautiful, messy, perfect details. Like life itself. Like love itself. Like truth itself. Forever and always. The morning headlines screamed across my phone screen. Horizon Estate scandal, social media empire built on lies. Environmental violations at Napa's most prestigious winery. Instagram influencer exposes own family's corrupt practices. I sat in my small Airbnb in San Francisco, watching the sun rise over the bay. It had been 3 weeks since the Harvest Festival. 3 weeks since I'd walked away from everything. My wedding ring lay in a drawer somewhere at Horizon Estate. Along with my perfect life. My perfect lies. The lawyers were still fighting. Richard had frozen my accounts. Threatened lawsuits. Tried to paint me as unstable, attention-seeking, vindictive. But the evidence was too strong. The truth too clear. My phone buzzed, another message from my agent. Book deals. Documentary offers. Everyone wanted the inside story. I ignored them all. Some truths weren't for sale. A knock at the door made my heart skip. Ethan stood there, holding coffee and pastries. Thought you might need breakfast, he said. His smile still made my chest tight. We'd been careful since that night at the Vineyard. Professional. Distant. The investigation was too important to compromise. But his eyes still held that warmth. That promise. The EPA report comes out today, he said, setting down the coffee. I nodded, unable to speak. We both knew what it would say. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of violations. falsified records, endangered species habitat destruction. All for profit. All for show. Richard's lawyers reached out, Ethan continued. My hands tightened around tea. He coffee cup. They're offering a deal. What kind of deal? Sign an NDA. Take the money. Disappear. The old Amanda would have considered it. The new one just laughed. No. Ethan's smile widened. That's what I told them. The morning light caught his face, highlighting the pride in his eyes. Pride in me. In us. In the truth. My phone buzzed again. This time it was different. A message from one of the vineyard workers. A photo. Workers removing the fake organic certification signs. Installing new ones. Real ones. It's happening, I whispered. Ethan moved closer, his arm brushing mine. You did this. We did this. The city was waking up outside my window. Fog rolling in from the bay. Cars honking. Life moving forward. I got a job offer, I said suddenly. Ethan waited, patient. An environmental consulting firm in Seattle. Good company? The best. When do you start? Haven't accepted yet. His hand found mine. Warm. Familiar now. What's holding you back? I turned to face him. You know what? His eyes softened. Amanda. I know. The investigation isn't over. No. And we need to be careful. Yes. And timing is everything. It is. But he didn't let go of my hand. The fog curled around the buildings outside. Hiding. Revealing. Like truth itself. Seattle's nice, he said finally. Lots of rain. Good coffee. Environmental regulations. We both smiled at that. My phone buzzed again. The EPA report was live. Headlines exploded across social media. Richard's empire beginning to crumble. Justice, slow but sure. I should go, Ethan said. Professional again. Proper. But his hand lingered on mine. Dinner tonight? He asked. To discuss the report. Of course. His smile said otherwise. The door closed behind him. I stood at the window, watching him disappear into the fog. My phone kept buzzing. Messages. Calls. Notifications. But none of them mattered. What mattered was the truth. The future. The possibility of rain in Seattle. And dinner tonight. With Ethan. To discuss the report. Of course. I smiled at my reflection in the window. The woman looking back wasn't perfect anymore. Her designer clothes were gone. Her influence diminished. Her life completely changed. But her eyes were clear. Her heart was light. And her future was bright as the sun burning through the fog. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not a social media post. Not a press release. But my story. The real story. Of truth and lies. of love and courage, of finding yourself in the ruins of who you pretended to be. Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the city, the bay, the future, clear and bright and true, like love itself, like truth itself, like life itself, when lived honestly, when lived bravely, when lived for love, real love, true love, the kind that grows in sunlight and shadow, in victory and defeat, in the space between what was and what will be. I typed the last words just as the sun broke through completely, then closed my laptop. Tonight was dinner. Tomorrow was Seattle. And the future? The future was as clear as the sky above the bay, as true as my heart, as real as love itself, forever and always. And